Okay, when you think of ancient Arabia, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, right, it's the birth of Islam. I mean, this was an event that just completely reshaped the entire world.
But what was Arabia actually like before all that? Before that momentous transformation? Who were the people living there? How did their societies even work? What did they believe in? Look, if we're going to truly get the massive scale of the change that Islam brought, we first have to rewind and understand the world it was born into. So let's dive in.
All right, so to really build this picture, we're going to walk through 5 key parts. We'll kick things off with the world of the tribes. Then we'll look at how cities started to rise. After that, we'll dive into the incredible mix of religions there. We'll even uncover some forgotten kingdoms of the sand. And then we'll wrap it all up to see why this whole world was just, well, teetering on the brink of a massive change.
Okay, first up, a world of tribes. And listen, to understand anything about this time and place, you have to start with the one thing that governed pretty much all of daily life, and that was the law of blood and vengeance. So just try to picture this, a world that's always on the move. For most folks back then, life was nomadic, revolving entirely around your family and your tribe. I mean, out in that unforgiving desert, your tribe wasn't just some label, it was your everything. It was your police, your courts, your social safety net. It was the only thing protecting you when things went sideways. Why? Because out there was no king, no central government. There was just you and your relatives.
And this is where things get really, really intense. The French historian Maxime Rodinson put it perfectly. He said, your life was only protected by one single thing, the absolute, rock-solid certainty that if anyone messed with you, your tribe would make them pay, dearly. It was simple, blood for blood and a life for a life. That was the unwritten and frankly terrifying law of the land.
Yeah, there's a word for this in Arabic, thar. It means the vendetta, the blood feud. And this wasn't just some fringe idea. It was the absolute core principle of Bedouin society. If someone from your tribe was killed, honor and basic survival demanded you get revenge. This whole system, it wasn't really about justice in our sense. It was a machine for creating endless cycles of conflict, these simmering feuds that could last for generations.
So what's the end result of all this? Well, the historian Gustav von Grunebaum nailed it when he called it a state of tribal guerrilla fighting, all against all. Just imagine that. A chaotic world of alliances that could change in a heartbeat and constant raids just to survive. For a huge part of Arabia, this state of almost constant low-level war was just normal life.
But that's not the entire picture. Because while the desert was all about this constant division, a totally new force was starting to rise up. Something that really challenged that old way of life. And that new force was the city.
And this created a massive split in society. On one hand, you've got the nomadic Bedouin. Their loyalty, it's to their family, their kin, period. They live off herding and, raiding. And they often look down on city folk with total contempt. But then, you have the cities. In these growing urban centers, a completely different way of life was starting to blossom. A life built on commerce and agriculture, not raiding, where your identity was becoming bigger than just your family. It was about being part of a town, a community.
And the poster child for this was, of course, Mecca. You could almost call it a triple threat to that old, divided tribal world. First, its location was perfect, a major hub on the caravan trade route. Second, it was the spiritual center of the whole region because it was home to the Kaaba, a sacred temple that tons of different tribes revered. And that leads to number 3. It became a kind of neutral diplomatic zone. See, during the annual pilgrimage, a truce was called, and in that time of peace, tribes could trade, talk, and settle their beefs. So in this really fractured land, Mecca was slowly starting to weave everyone together.
Which brings us right to the topic of faith. And honestly, the religious world of pre-Islamic Arabia is probably not what you're picturing. It wasn't just some simple pagan world. Oh no, it was this incredibly vibrant and complicated spiritual mosaic.
Now, while it's true that polytheism, worshipping many gods, was the dominant belief, it was far from the only game in town. Just look at this breakdown. The big Abrahamic faiths had a really powerful and long-established presence here. We're talking Christianity and Judaism. These weren't new ideas or foreign imports. They were deeply, deeply woven into the very fabric of Arabian life.
The sheer diversity is just amazing when you think about it. You had the polytheists, right? Each tribe, each city had its own patron gods. The Kaaba in Mecca supposedly had something like 360 different idols inside. Then you had these well-established Christian communities, especially in places with Byzantine or Ethiopian influence. You also had really significant Jewish tribes and communities, particularly in cities like Yathrib, which, we now call Medina.
And get this, there was even a homegrown monotheistic movement called Hanafism, people who rejected all the idols but weren't strictly Jewish or Christian. What you're seeing is this incredibly dynamic, spiritually charged world, a place that was just buzzing with ideas and was totally ripe for something new.
So, let's recap. We've got fractured tribes, we've got cities on the rise, and a wild mix of religions. But what about bigger political structures? Like kingdoms or states? The answer is a definite yes. So let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture with the kingdoms of the sand.
Okay, so traditionally, Arab historians themselves made a big distinction between the south and the north. Down in the south, think modern-day Yemen, you had these more centralized, established, and pretty wealthy kingdoms, like the Himyarites. But the north was a different story. It was more a land of loose tribal confederations, and crucially, they were often stuck right in the middle of the two great superpowers of the day, basically acting as buffer states and proxy armies.
And if you want a perfect example of just how high the stakes could get, look no further than the Himyarite kingdom in the south. So they managed to unify southern Arabia, and one of their kings even converted to Judaism. But then, a later king started persecuting the Christians in his kingdom, and that set off a major international crisis. I mean, the two big Christian powers, the Byzantine Empire and the Kingdom of Axium, they formed an alliance, invaded, and completely crushed the Himyarite kingdom. This is huge. It proves that Arabia was no isolated backwater. It was a serious player in the geopolitical chess game of the era.
And this was even more true up in the north. That epic, centuries-long rivalry between the two superpowers of the day, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Persian Empire, a huge part of that rivalry was fought right here in Arabia. Each empire basically sponsored its own Arab client kingdom. So you had the Ghassanids, who were Christian, fighting for the Byzantines, and then you had the Lakhmids fighting for the Persians. And for centuries, these two Arab kingdoms just beat the stuffing out of each other in brutal proxy wars, turning most of northern Arabia into one big strategic battleground.
All right, so let's pull all these different threads together now. What's the big picture we're seeing? It's a world just full of contradictions, isn't it? A society being pulled in two completely different directions at the same time. You can just feel that the stage is being set for something massive, something truly transformative.
It really all boils down to this incredible tension. On one side, you have all these forces of division, right? The constant tribal warfare, the lack of any central law, these foreign empires pulling everyone into their fights. But at the exact same time, you have these powerful forces pushing for unity. You've got the growing cities like Mecca, that annual pilgrimage truce that brought people together, expanding trade routes connecting everyone, and of course, a shared language and culture. You can almost feel the pressure building, like something has to give. And all of this leaves us with one last massive question. In this world, a world of fierce warriors and savvy merchants, a world of deep, ancient divisions, but also brand new connections, what single idea, what single force could possibly be powerful enough to finally break those endless cycles of vengeance and disunity and forge all these fractured peoples into a single unified power that would, quite literally, change the world